Staring at my car and my crib, give me worth and meaning, cause I know they never did. Them numbers in my bank account are no reason for living, and sleeping with bad women really doesn't keep me driven. I'm sure this man sitting beside me.
And a lot of what our choices are today, we're making choices based on what we think is going to bring that to us. And it can be a lot of different things you can have in mind. You know, it can be relationships and one day getting married and having a family, having a wife, having a husband, and what that's going to bring to you. And so you may be making decisions that heading in that direction. You may think it's your career, your education, and if that's the case, you're really going to do well and excel in that. For some of you, it's looking forward to maybe even the opportunity of doing athletics on a level even higher than what you're doing now. But many of the choices and the things that you're doing is based on what you think really deep down inside is going to really satisfy you in life or make you think that you have a significant life, a meaningful life. And if I look back in my journey, like everything in my story, in my journey was really pointing to that, pointing to what was going to make me feel significant, make me feel valuable, make me feel like life was meaningful or fulfilled. And it all started way back from the very beginning. You know, being in my family growing up, it was like I was looking for meaning and satisfaction and purpose within the structure of my home. You know, having a home which was going to provide me some love and acceptance and belonging. And in the family I grew up in, man, I right away, that wasn't there for me. You know, I had a father and a mother who were in a marriage who really didn't like each other all that much. And instead of like the nurturing, loving, community and what you think a family should be, my family was nothing like that. It was the cursing of my dad cursing at my mom and calling my mom everything other than what her name is. Instead of treating my mom like she was a queen, he treated my mom like she was dirt. And so it was like constantly, many times a week, it was hearing this, the barrage of just him kind of beating down my mom, and never see him kissing my mom, and never see him telling my mom, I love you, never seeing him hug my mom. Never hearing him say to me, I love you, or he's proud of me, but hearing him curse at me or tell me I didn't have any sense and I would never be anything or amount to anything in life, and beating me in ways that were violent and beyond what a kid should be beaten. And this was kind of the environment that I grew up in, and so significance and meaning and value and love, it was like none of that I found at home. So it was the searching outside of that it must be somewhere outside of this. And so very young, about 8 years of age, I started going to church. One of the things my grandmother started to take me to. And actually, I had this mixed thing about God because my grandma was like the meanest person in the world. So it was like, man, God must be like, he must be super mean because like my grandma's mean. It's like, you know, she would tell me about God and tell me he loved me. And then it was like she would give me beatings beyond what my dad would. And he wasn't saying nothing about God. So then I began to think like, you know, obviously, it might not be here in church, and definitely not the kind of church or God that my grandmother's talking about. But I got involved with church as a kid, and it was probably a constant in my life from the time I was 8 until the time I was 17 and went away to school. But it wasn't really something that I thought would, you know, bring anything to my life. It was just something I did. You know, it was just like a custom. It was a habit. I went there because my grandmother wanted me to go. My granddad was a deacon, so it was like one of those things I just kind of went. I just kind of did. But it was still this longing in my heart and thinking like, man, there's got to be more than this. And so because there wasn't a love at home and what I thought like, you know, God would bring, it didn't seem like that was what I thought it would be. And so it was like my friends, man, my friends became my world. And so if somebody showed me love and somebody showed me acceptance and somebody showed me that they were there for me, man, I was willing to do whatever. And so as a little kid, I mean like 10, 11 years of age, I was drinking. Man, I was vandalizing property with my friends. I was stealing and robbing. Man, I was talking about sex and wasn't having sex, but talking about sex because my friends was talking about it. And I was smoking and experimenting with drugs and doing all these things and a lot of things I didn't even want to do. But it was like, man, I want to feel some belonging somewhere. I want to find some meaning, some purpose somewhere. And they were showing me a little bit of attention. And so it was like I was willing to play that role, but I was a kid who would also wear a mask. My mom and dad divorced around the time when I was 11. So for me, that was kind of a time where I was thinking like, maybe it's the best of both worlds. I don't have to hear my dad kind of crush my mom or even downplay me. But yet at the same time, it was a hard time because the only time I remember vacations in my home is when my dad was around. And after that, there wasn't many vacations or things that we did. And there were a lot of things that my dad did when I was a kid before my mom and dad married that began to give me a very warped perspective of marriage and sex and love and intimacy. Though I never saw my dad kiss my mom, I never saw my dad hug my mom, never saw my dad tell my mom he loved her. But I would see this same man, he would take me out to bars with him, and he would treat other women like they were queens. I would see him going into rooms with other women, and I would know he was doing stuff with those women that was only reserved for him to be doing with my mom. And he would treat them like they were the best things and see him come home and treat my mom like she was absolute dirt. I would remember him saying stuff to me as a little boy, like never let your wife know everything that you do in life. Always keep you another spare woman on the side. You know, if you have money, always put some to the side because you never know when things are going to happen. So these were like things that were imprinted in me and kind of impregnated in me when I was like a little kid growing up. I would go and hang out with my dad and his friends, and in order to occupy my brother and I, they would put us in a room full of like Playboy magazines and just allow us to look through these pornographic books for hours so that they could do what they wanted to do. And so it was like all these things were a part of kind of my world and kind of shaping my world and things that I looked to and was affecting the choices that I was making. But I also, in my family, nobody ever graduated with a college degree, and especially when I got into about junior high school, man, I started really thinking about like, what am I going to do with my life? And I began to think like, you know what, education is probably going to be a key to it. So even though I was out, you know, doing the drinking and doing all these other things with my friends, I was the kid who in school was knocking out the grades. And so I was the kid that wore the mask in different environments. So among my teachers, man, they thought like I was this model kid. Because in my mind, it was like, you know what, if none of these other things are giving me what I'm looking for, then one day down the road, I'm going to get a college degree, and I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to make all kinds of money, and maybe I'll have a family, and what I'm not experiencing now, I will get later on, so I'm going to start doing things to get me in that place so I can get there. And so I busted my grades out, and I did that very well, but yet I still dabbled back and forth with all these other things because it was like I got to find something somewhere. And almost like if I could turn the Rubik's Cube the right way, that one day I'm going to solve this matrix, that one day I'm going to get the right combination of stuff that's going to give me what my heart really is longing for, satisfaction, meaning, and purpose. So it was like I just pursued after all of these things. And then when I got later into junior high school, it was like athletics. When I was about 12 years old, I started working out. And man, I would work out like 6 days a week. And this was from the time I was like 12 to the time I was 26. It was like I would just like almost in essence like kill my body with the way that I would work out. Because it was like I'm going to do something significant. If it don't come from education, it'll come from athletics. I'll be this great athlete. I'll just work and prepare and get to this level where I can do these things. And so my life was revolved around all these different things and got involved with sports and played a number of different sports in high school. I ran track. I played football. I swam. It was like I'm going to find a sport where I can excel and do things good, and I was probably average or a little above average in some sports, but at best I was average. Just never really was blessed with that skill for athletics, but it's like I poured all of my heart into that, as well as into athletics, as well as into my friends, and all these different things, and that was kind of the way that I was living. Gonna look for something that's gonna give it to me. And so that was kind of my life all through high school, and then I went off to college, went off 2 hours away, University of Pittsburgh, and for me it was kind of almost, in essence, I could have kind of a new start in life. I didn't have many people who went off to school where I went off to, so nobody really knew me. So it was a thing like I can be, you know, I can be who I've always kind of wanted to be, and I can take on the image I've always kind of wanted to have. And so some of the things that I did didn't really change, but I didn't feel like I had to wear the mask as much. Because I didn't feel like I had to wear a different mask for my grandmother when I went to church, and a different mask for my mom, and a different mask for my teacher, and a different mask for my friends. That I could just kind of take some of that off, and I could just be me and be more free in being me. So the things that I maybe tried to hide around my mom, like I just full out did that now. But it was still a thing where I got great grades, and it wasn't because I was like this smart guy. It was because I had a mind that I could read stuff, and I could study it, and I could look at it, and when it was time to put it back on the test, I could regurgitate it and give it back to them so that I was getting good grades in school, but yet I was partying 3 to 4 days a week. I was drinking and getting drunk. I wasn't an athlete, but I went to a school where the top sport was football, and I made a number of my friends, a number of my good friends were football players, so even though I didn't play football, I almost got the fringe benefits of being really close to an athlete, because when they went to the parties, I was rolling with them, and when they was off campus and people didn't know me, people would even think maybe I played football because I was so close to them. So it was kind of faking the funk and trying to, you know, get into the thing, and if I could be close to them, it'll make life work and make life fit. So the academics are going on, the partying's going on, and one thing that I had never done up until this time when I went to college, but I told all my friends that I had done, I had never had sex. I had never been into a sexual relationship, but there were so many seeds that had been planted in my life about sex from my friends, from my dad, from the TV shows that I watched, and from everything that I saw and what I heard from my friends. It was like sex was this great thing. And so in my thinking, it's like if none of these other things got it, then maybe when I get into a relationship with a girl and have sex, then that's going to be it. So I had my first girlfriend when I was 19. And we started having sex pretty soon. And 3 months after we got into a relationship, she came up pregnant. So I'm 19, I'm a sophomore in college. And I ain't ready to be a dad, and I ain't ready to be a husband, and I ain't ready to stop school to get a job and to take care of a family, and she ain't ready to be a mom, and she's not ready to be a wife, and she ain't ready to stop school either. And so we make a decision that she'll have an abortion. And we were just thinking like she's going to have this abortion and life's just going to continue on as usual, and it didn't. That this was a huge thing that brought a lot of pain to both of us. You know, I think both of us realized that this wasn't a blob of tissue. This was a life that we had not allowed to come into this world, a life in some essence that we had murdered by the decision that we made, and it caused a lot of pain to come to me, a lot of pain to come to her, and this relationship which I thought like, man, I never had this close, tight-knit relationship with my mom and dad, and now I got this girl and we all lovey-dovey, and it seems like, man, there's great love and intimacy in that. And then all of a sudden there was like this huge alienation between me and her because this decision brought a huge wedge between us. And so now I'm dealing with pain and hurt and shame. But instead of thinking about a God that I heard about as a kid, man, I never thought that this guy could do anything for me. So he wasn't even a blip on my radar screen or a thought in my mind. And one of the things that played into that is when I went to church as a kid, man, there were a lot of adults who went to church and they raised their hands and they sang songs to God, and they would look like they was into the message that was being said about God. But these same adults I would see throughout the week, and they were living like my relatives who wanted nothing to do with God, like my father who would not step into a church. Their lives didn't look any different from his. In fact, there was a leader in my church, and I'm sad to say that there was a leader in my church who had 5 kids, who was married. When my mom and dad divorced and started coming to church, my mom and this guy entered into a relationship with one another that lasted from the time that I was 11 until the time after I went to college. And so for me, it was one of those things like, if there's a God, if he's real, I never really doubted that God was real. But if he is real, then the only time he must care about life is when people step into this building that's called a church. And then during those couple of hours, you put on a performance and act like you want to be his. But then outside of that, you can live any old kind of way you want to. So when I graduated from high school, man, I graduated from the church because I didn't need that. Because all of that stuff, it looked like you can get all of that without God. So when my life was hurt and there was pain in it at 19 years of age, God wasn't even a thought in my mind. It was, I'm going to medicate my own pain. And you know I'm going to medicate my pain? There's more girls out here. So if me and my girl are falling apart, there's more girls I can get in a relationship with, and I'll just go with them and have sex with them and get in relationships with them. And there's more beer that can be drunk and more parties that I can go to, and there's more grades that I can get and more things that I can put on my resume. There's more things that I can chase after, and after a while, I'm going to find the key and I'm going to solve the matrix, and everything's going to be cool. And that's the way I live. And that's what my life looked like as a college student. And I graduated from college, and I thought that there was going to be like this great fanfare. Because, man, I'm the first person in my family to graduate with a 4-year degree. Nobody in my family had graduated with a 4-year degree. I thought I was going to be like applauded, held as a king, and the day came, and the day went, and it wasn't all that fanfare. And the good job that I thought that I would get from my college education, I went to so many interviews with so many different companies, the companies I wanted to get a job with, they wouldn't hire me, and I ended up kind of taking a job with the university as kind of a last resort because I couldn't get a job nowhere else. So it was like all that education, all that time I put into that, and that don't seem like it's working either. This relationship with this girl didn't work either, and all these other things just aren't working out. That's kind of how I was living through my college years. Get this job, started working at this job, and one of the benefits of working at the job, even though it wasn't the job I wanted, they would pay for me to go back to school. So in my mind, I was thinking like, you know what? Yeah, the answer's probably more education. So what I'll do is I'll just go back to school, I'll get a master's degree, and then I'll get a good job, and I'll make a whole lot of money, and life will be all good. But then I start working at this job, and a couple months into the job, I get into a relationship with one of my coworkers. And a few months later, she ends up pregnant. Now, I'm not 19. I'm not still in school. I'm quote-unquote a grown man. I got a job. I've graduated. I don't have the same excuses I had when I was 19. And we kind of talked about what we were going to do. And she was like, I'm not having a baby if you're not going to be with me. So we're not going to be married. I'm not going to have a child because I'm not raising a child on my own. And so in my mind, I thought, then you know what? We'll just get married. And you know what? In my mind, I thought that I'm going to put a ring on my finger and I'm going to be like this radically different guy. I remember as a kid growing up, you know, thinking of my dad and how he treated my mom. I remember when I used to dream about being a husband and being a father, my dream was never like being my dad. It was always being the ultra opposite of my dad. I was going to love my wife. I was going to take care of my kids. I was going to really provide for my family. I was going to be there. But I put a ring on my finger, and guess what? And I was just like my dad. Man, the same thing I saw my dad doing to my mom was the same thing I was doing with her. I'm married. I treat her like she's absolute dirt. And I'm running out, and I'm sleeping with other women. And I'm doing other things. And I'm still running with my boys and partying and doing all this stuff. And I'm still pursuing my education because somehow I'm going to find the answer to all this stuff out of all of it. Lived like that for a few years, and at 26 years of age, my life in many regards started to fall apart. By this time, I had graduated from graduate school and still couldn't get a job making the type of money I thought I should get. Kind of one year after another, I'm going from job to job to job because nothing's working. Working for a little bit, that ain't it. Go to another job, work that ain't it. But then finally at 26, because of how our marriage and life was, my wife and I, we decided we would separate. And for a while, I was all right with that. Because I was thinking, like, I don't have to feel guilty about some of the stuff that I'm doing and how I'm living. And coming home to you and faking, I could just flat out do it. And still act like I want to get with you and still raise our son together. And that was kind of what I was thinking. You know, I'm going to do that. And then one day she kind of came and told me, like, I'm leaving the city, taking your son, we're gone. And it was like at that point in my life, it was like all these things that I had tried to make something out of my life, I realized that all I had made was a mess. It was like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle. You got this beautiful picture of what it's supposed to look like. And my picture didn't look nothing like that. Pieces all over the place, out of sorts. Didn't look beautiful. It looked like a mess. There was devastation in my life, in my heart. That's my story up to the age of 26. But what about you? You know, as you think about your life, what are those things in your life that you're pursuing and you're chasing after? And you think that if I get it, you know, if I get these combination of things, life is going to be okay. And it's going to work out all good. And I ask you another question with that. Are you sure? Are you sure that if you get that, that it will be that? You know, we live in a day where we look at the rich and famous of our day. And we look at these men and women who have everything the world would say, man, if you get that, your life is set. But you know what? They're really not satisfied. I mean, I hang out with guys that make millions of dollars. And one guy came up to me and he said, you know, David, when I was in college, I used to think, like, if I could just make $100,000, man, that would be cool. He was like, I got into the league, made my first million, and it was like, you know what, if I could just get another million, that would be cool. Or I could get another million in the bank, it would be cool. He was like, you know what, no matter how much I get, it just doesn't satisfy. I always want more. There's more that I want. There's another guy who came up to me and said, you know what, I got a girl who loves me. We've been together before I was in the NFL. She didn't want me because I'm a professional football player. We've been together for a while. She loves me. I love her. But yet, there's something in me that wants more. And I'm out here, David, and I'm with all these other women. And I'm doing all these other things. I mean, he has a girl who adores him. He plays professional football, the game he dreamed of playing when he was a little boy. And now he's reached his dream. He has a woman who loves him. And yet there's something in his heart that says there has to be more than this. And all the things that he has put together and attained in life still hasn't given him satisfaction. And no matter how much of earthly things we amass, it never can satisfy us. There was a guy who lived about 3,000 years ago. A guy named Solomon. He was a king. It's in the Bible. And this guy, he was the who's who of his day. Man, he would make the people of our day who we look up to, he would make them look like they haven't even begun to climb the ladder, because he had a status that very few men in the world, in the history of the world, has ever been able to attain. If this guy was alive today, he would be blowing up social media so much that everybody would be following him on Twitter, and everybody would be wanting to be his friend on Facebook. I mean, he had so much money that 50 Cent would have looked at him and said, man, how did you get rich and not even die trying? I mean, he had so much money that our government would have been going to him saying, yo, man, can you bail us out of this deficit that we're in? Because he had so much loot. Man, his palace was so laid out. Martha Stewart and HGTV would have been coming up to him to try to get some interior decorating techniques because his palace was that laid out. His enterprise was so astounding that Donald Trump would have been coming up to him saying, yo, Solomon, can I be your apprentice and be on your show because you got it going on? He had so much wisdom and insight into the way things in this world work that Dr. Phil would have been coming to him, laying on his couch and asking him questions about how to make it in life, and he would have never asked him, is that working for you? This brother had it going on. He was such a king that you would have never found a basketball player in his land rolling up calling himself King James, because he was a real king. But when this guy got to the end of his life and began to evaluate everything he had and everything he had done, I want to read to you just a few words that he said. And you can find this in Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. And this is in the Message Bible, so it might be a little different than yours. But this is what he said when he looks back at his life and he looks at things that he's done. He said, I said to myself, let's go for it. Experiment with pleasure. Have a good time. But there was nothing to it, nothing but smoke. What do I think of the fun-filled life? Insane. Insane. My verdict on the pursuit of happiness. Who needs it? With the help of a bottle of wine and all the wisdom I could muster, I tried my level best to penetrate the absurdity of life. I wanted to get a handle on anything useful we mortals might do during the years we spent on this earth. He says, oh, I did great things. I built houses. I planted vineyards. I designed gardens and parks and planted a variety of fruit trees in them. I made pools of water to irrigate the groves of trees. I bought slaves, male and female, who had children, giving me even more slaves. And I acquired large herds and flocks, larger than any before me in Jerusalem. I piled up silver and gold, lutes from kings and kingdoms. I gathered a chorus of singers to entertain me with song, and most exquisite of all pleasures, voluptuous maidens for my bed. Oh, how I prospered. I left all my predecessors in Jerusalem far behind me. I left them behind in the dust. What's more, I kept a clear head through it all. Everything I wanted, I took. I never said no to myself. I gave in to every impulse, held back nothing. I sucked the marrow of pleasure out of every task, my reward to myself for a hard day's work. So this guy had all the things that in his economy were the very best of his day. He had workers, he had women, he had wine, he had parties, he had more than anybody else. He had so much that he said, if I wanted something, I would just get it. Imagine that. You had the title, the position, the influence, the money to get anything you wanted. That's how he rolled. That's what he did. So you would think that when he got to the end of his life, being able to live the way he lived, he would say, and I had a good life, and I lived happily ever after. But that's not what he says. He says, then I took a good look at everything I'd done. I looked at all the sweat and hard work. But when I looked, I saw nothing but smoke. Smoke and spitting into the wind. There was nothing to any of it. Nothing. That when he looked at it, and another translation, it says it was all meaningless. It was all vanity. It was all like chasing after the wind. I think in Solomon's heart, he knows what our hearts knows. That somehow there's this satisfaction in life that we're supposed to be living for. And it's like, he's like, I know it's there. I know it's real. It's like the wind. It blows past me. I have a sense of it. But like the wind, I can never grab hold of it. It keeps blowing past me. I know it's there. I keep chasing hard after it, but I can never grab hold of it. It's like that dog who proverbially chases his tail and can never reach its tail and just seems like he's just going round and round, and what he's really looking for, he can never really get. And that's what Solomon feels, though he had this life unlike anybody else that's ever lived. But later on, he goes in chapter 3, verse 11, and he says this is the reason why. Because God, because he has put eternity into the hearts of men. That for all of us, that we were made for more than a moment. We were made for more than temporary things and temporary relationships. And just like when we go to that movie and we feel like, man, there has to be more than that. That's how we feel about life. That there has to be more than this. That we realize that there's a bigger drama unfolding around us than just the one about our individual life and the things that we chase after, trying to find something that'll make us happier. That life is much bigger than this. In fact, we are made with a hole in our heart that no thing could ever satisfy. Not all the money in the world, not all the degrees, not all the accolades, not all the fame, not all the applause, not all the women, not all the guys, not all the sex, not all the stuff that the world says if you get it, you got it, and you're good. None of that stuff can satisfy. We got a God-shaped hole in our heart, and the only one who can truly satisfy us deep down in the deepest sense of our being is the one who created us. That there's a God who made us. That there's a God who created us. And he created us for the purpose to have a relationship with him. And many of us, if you have a relationship with him, you can have the one your heart cries out for, but you still can be chasing after other things to try to find satisfaction. So it's like you have this fountain in your life that's ever flowing, that can satisfy you, your deepest longings, your deepest desires, your deepest needs, but we keep running to other things. Instead of running to this fountain, we keep running to sponges that are dirty and polluted and trying to twist the drink of water out of them. And they can never satisfy. When God is saying, I'm here and I can satisfy you because I made you for a relationship with me. You're the pinnacle of my creation. There is nothing like you that I've made, but I've made you for me. Not for you to do your own thing. Not for you to try to get your own fame and your own influence and to make your own way out of life. But God made you for him, to bring him glory and to bring him honor and to bring him praise. That God is like the sun and our lives are like planets. That we're to revolve around him. As long as the planets revolve around the sun, everything is okay. But if they get out of their orbit and it gets messed up, then there's chaos. And as long as we rotate around the one that we were created to rotate around, everything in life will be in order. But when we don't, life is chaotic, and we try to take everything we can to try to make it fit, and nothing seems to work. But all of us have lived this way. And that's the essence of what the Bible would call sin. It says in Romans that we all have sinned and we've fallen short of the glory of God. That instead of living this life that we were given for God and for his glory, that we've lived this life for us. and what we think is going to be best for us. And instead of bringing us what our heart desperately needs, a sense of belonging, love, and acceptance and satisfaction. When we live for us and we do things our way, it leads to alienation. Alienation from God. Alienation in other relationships. Alienation in other stuff. And God is saying that he's made a way for us to be reconnected with him even though we've lived life for ourselves. And when I was 26 years of age and my life was falling apart and the bottom had dropped out of my life, after I had tried all these pieces to try to put everything together, I was confronted with the person of Jesus Christ. I was confronted with the fact that there's a God who made me. You know, we live in a world where they say, you know, there's no meaning in life. There's no purpose in life. It's just this cosmic goo, and life is to go any old kind of way. Well, if that's true, why does my life say that there has to be something more? Why is this yearning in my heart that calls out for more? If there's no real meaning or purpose to life in itself, then why does my heart cry out for something more? Because there is meaning and purpose, and there's a God who made you, and there's a God who loved you. And there's a God who sent his son to die on the cross to forgive you for your sin, to forgive me for my sin, to forgive us for all the things that we've tried to do to make life work apart from him, that Jesus Christ would come and he would go to a cross and he would die for our sin. And God would be screaming through that act, this is how much I love you. Maybe you've never found love and acceptance from somebody else. Maybe in your family, just like mine, there was no love and acceptance there. Maybe you've tried to find it in relationships with other people and there was no love, no genuine love and acceptance there. With friends, with significant others, no love, no relationship there. But God screams to us from the cross, this is how much I love you. Maybe other people have known about you and left out of your life. But here's a God who knows everything about you. He knows our rebellion. He knows us wanting to live for us rather than him. And yet he says, I will love you anyhow. And to show you how much I love you, I will give my son, who lived a perfect life, to die in your place and to pay the penalty for your sin. And if you ever wanted to know what real love was about and how valuable you are, God would say, I would give up my perfect son for you. And I would write a check to purchase you to be mine, to be the object of my love and affection. And I would sign that check not with a ballpoint pen, but I would sign that check with the blood of my son. So if you ever want to know how valuable you are and how loved you are, then look no further than the cross, because God, through his son Jesus Christ, was screaming out, I love you this much, to pull you out of all of that mess and the life you've been trying to create that is vanity and nothing, that'll bring devastating consequences if you keep walking that way, that I have paid a tremendous price for you so you can have real life, so you don't have to run after things that don't satisfy. And when I met Jesus Christ when I was 26, he did a radical work in my life. Does that mean I'm a perfect man? No. I'm still a man that is still learning to love my wife and what it means to raise kids. And I did end up going through a divorce. But you know what God has done? God has brought me to a place where I don't need to chase after women to find satisfaction anymore, because he is the one who can satisfy my heart. I don't have to run after drinking and dabble with drugs to try to get some high, because he gives me a high that never goes away. He has done things in my life that I could never do with all the combination of things I tried to do. And not only that, he has forgiven me of the guilt of my past. And he has given me a fresh start to run with him. And to have the life that he dreamed for me to have. Not the life of my own making. That he has a greater dream and a greater purpose for me than I ever could imagine. Now my life just isn't about temporary things, but I get a chance to make an eternal impact in the lives of other men who can make an eternal impact in the lives of other people at the highest level. And that's only God who can do that in my life. And God has some significant things he wants to do in each of your life. And I don't know where you are. Maybe some of you, you're here because there's an interest in God. But maybe you've never met Jesus Christ. You're still trying to figure this thing out, work this thing out on your own. And you're trying to see, could possibly Jesus have something to do with life? Well, I'll tell you this, that he's the author of life. He's the only source of life. Outside of Jesus Christ, you're merely existing, but real life is only found in him. And if you're sitting here today and you don't know him, today would be a good day to meet him and let him take control of your life. And if you do know him, honestly evaluate, what in life are you really living for? Are you living for this one who loves you far greater than anybody else could, knows everything about you, and would give up what's most valuable for you? Or are you living for temporary things in this world that come and go, that change with the seasons? Or are you living your life for a God who's eternal, whose love for you is eternal, whose plan for you is eternal, and who has rewards that nobody could ever take away? The quest for satisfaction.